Welcome back, everybody. My name's Mr. Swaner, and today we're going to talk about subtracting integers. Before we begin, make sure you pick up your companion notes so that you can follow along to this presentation. And before we start subtracting integers, let's review adding integers, because we're going to turn all of our subtraction problems into addition problems. And when we talked about adding integers, I gave you two easy rules to remember. The first rule is same sign sum. And that was a very simple rule. Told us that if the two numbers we're adding together have the same sign, that we can just add them together and keep that sign. So 5 plus 3 is 8. They're both negative. My answer will be negative 8. Difference, on the other hand, tells me that if I'm adding two numbers and they have different signs, like 5 plus negative 3, that I need to find the difference between these two numbers. The difference between 5 and 3 is 2, and that I am to keep the sign from the number that is biggest in terms of absolute value. So 5 is bigger than 3 because 5 is positive. My answer is positive. And just to kind of reiterate how that works, let me flip the signs around here and do negative 5 plus 3. So the difference between these numbers is still 2, and 5 is still bigger than 3, but in this case 5 is negative, so my answer will be negative. Let's dive right into subtracting integers. On the left here, I have 8 minus 4 equals 4, and that's something that we should know to be true. And on the right, I'm going to show you our first rule, Rule 1. Rule 1 tells us that subtracting something and adding a negative is exactly the same thing. So 8 minus 4 is the exact same as 8 plus negative 4. And I'm going to graph this on the number line simultaneously. Remember that we always start at 0, and I have a positive 8, so I need to go right 8. And then over here on the left it says minus 4. So I need to go left 4 units. And here on the right it tells me I need to add negative 4. And this is something that we've learned is the exact same thing as minus 4. So we need to go left 4 units. And that puts us at positive 4. So just to reiterate, our Rule 1 tells us that anytime you see a subtraction sign, just one, that you can interpret that as add the opposite. So 3 minus 9 is the exact same as 3 plus negative 9. And that's negative 6. And the difference between 3 and 9 is 6. 9 is bigger than 3. 9 is negative, so that's why we have a negative 6. Let's look at a couple of these problems using our Rule 1. I have one subtraction sign in between my numbers. So 7 minus 9, I'm going to change into 7 plus negative 9. The difference between 7 and 9 is 2. 9 is bigger. 9 is negative. My answer is negative 2. 1 minus 5, I'm going to change into 1 plus negative 5. The difference between 1 and 5 is 4. And 5 is bigger than 1 because 5 is negative. I'm going to make my answer negative. And then lastly here I have 4 minus 12, which I'm going to change into 4 plus negative 12. The difference between 4 and 12 is 8. 12 is negative, so my answer will be negative. Now let's look at another scenario where we're going to have a negative number first minus a positive number. Now I can use the same rule. I'm going to take the subtraction sign in the middle and change that into adding a negative. So negative 2 plus negative 7. And that's my same sign sum rule. Negative 2 plus negative 7 is negative 9. And if I graph that, I go left 2. And then in both cases, I need to minus 7 after I've minus 2. So I need to continue in the left direction, 7 units, which puts me at negative 9. So again, that Rule 1 tells us that if we have one subtraction sign, we can interpret that as add the opposite, and we can change the operation to plus a negative. Now I know in this case, you may be saying to yourself, but Mr. Swaner, there are two minus signs in this problem. I've got negative 2, and I've got negative 7. Well, yes, but the operation symbol is this one. This is the only one that we really care about. The symbol in front of the 2 is just telling us that the 2 is negative. Again, I've got negative 3 minus 4, and I can just kind of show you how we would graph this. We would start at 0, and we would go left 3 and then left 4 more, because they're both negative. So I'm going to go left 3, left 4, and that puts me at negative 7. Well, I could do this the other way. I could say negative 3 plus negative 4 equals negative 7, and that's the same exact thing. So let's try a couple using our same rule 1. I've got negative 4 plus negative 1. And this is my same sign situation, so I'm going to add these together and keep my answer negative. 4 plus 1 is 5. My answer will be negative 5. Negative 2 minus 8, I'm going to change into negative 2 plus negative 8. 2 plus 8 is 10. They're both negative, so my answer will be negative 10. And negative 1 minus 7, I'm going to change into negative 1 plus negative 7. 7 and 1 is 8. My answer will be negative. Well, we've taken a look at Rule 1. Let's take a look at Rule 2. Rule 2 tells me that when there are two negative signs right next to each other, that you can change them both to positives. So here we have 4 minus negative 7. And this is kind of weird. It's kind of like telling us 4 add the opposite of negative 7, which would be positive 7. So I can just change these into two positives. And now I just have 4 plus 7. Positive 4, positive 7. My answer is 11. And you might be thinking to yourself, Mr. Swaner, how can I subtract two numbers and get a bigger number? I would agree it's kind of a weird situation, but when we're saying minus a negative, we're saying 4 do the opposite of negative 7. So the opposite of negative 7 is positive 7. It's kind of a weird scenario, but 4 minus negative 7 is the same as 4 plus 7, which is 11. So let's try a few of these using the shortcut that I call it the change rule, because you're changing both of the signs, so we would just change. So here I have 5 plus 8. That's 13. 2 minus negative 7, and these two negatives right next to each other should look very strange to you, and you should want to change them into positives. So now I have 2 plus 7, which is 9. This next situation, I have 6 minus negative 4. I have two negative signs right next to each other, so I can change them. 6 plus 4 is 10. Now I've got 5 minus 12. Hopefully I didn't trick you here. We see that there's just one subtraction sign, so I'm going to change that to 5 plus negative 12. And I have to use my different signs rule here, because my two numbers that I'm adding have different signs. The difference between 5 and 12 is 7, and 12 is bigger than 5, so it's going to be a negative 7. 3 minus 8, I've got one subtraction sign there, so I'm going to change it to 3 plus negative 8. Again, I've got different signs, so the difference between 3 and 8 is 5. 8 is bigger, and 8 is negative, so it's going to be negative 5. 9 minus 12, one subtraction sign here, so I need to change that to 9 plus negative 12. Different signs, so the difference between these two numbers is 3. 12 is bigger, and it's negative, so I'm going to have a negative 3. Well, a negative minus a negative, that's a situation where we're going to use Rule 2, and we're going to use Rule 2 because of these negatives right here. Those are the ones that should look strange to us. So whenever there are two negatives right next to each other like that, we're going to change them both into positives. So negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. So let's look at a couple using our change rule, but with a negative number in front. So Again, the only minuses I care about are the subtraction signs, or minuses, or negatives, or whatever you want to call them. They're all the same thing. The only ones that I care about are the ones in between the two numbers. So I'm going to change both of those into positives. And now I have negative 5 plus 4. I'm going to have to use my difference rule, and the difference between 5 and 4 is 1. 5 is bigger than 4, and it's negative, so I'm going to keep my answer negative. Here I've got these two signs in the middle, and these should really stick out to you as something that you need to fix, so we're going to use our rule 2 here. And now I have negative 10 plus 12. The difference between these numbers is 2, and 12 is bigger, and 12 is positive, so my answer will remain positive. Now I've got 15 minus negative 7. Hopefully this is sticking out to you, and you're thinking to yourself, I need to change that. And now I have 15 plus 7. 15 plus 7 is 22. Both my signs are positive, so my answer will remain positive. This next one I have negative 5 minus 4. And I hope that you're thinking to yourself, rule 1. Even though there's two negatives here, rule 1 is the one I want to use because there's only one subtraction sign in between the numbers. So I'm going to change this to negative 5 plus negative 4. So now I can use my same sign rule. 5 plus 4 is 9. They're both negative, so my answer will be negative. And then lastly, I have 7 minus 9. I have one subtraction sign, so I'm going to change this to 7 plus negative 9. The difference between these numbers is 2. 9 is bigger, 9 is negative, so my answer will be negative. Alright, in closing, let's go ahead and review our rules. Rule 1, if the problem has one subtraction sign, what are we supposed to do? We need to change this to plus a negative. So we're going to make 2 marks. We're going to change our minus into plus a negative. And our rule 2 tells us that if we have 2 subtraction signs, that we need to change them both. We need to change them both into pluses. So just a little example here, 3 minus negative 2. I'm going to change them both, and I'll have 3 plus 2, which is 5. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, study hard and keep practicing.